A hidden box, a secret letter, and a truth that destroyed his past. Before we start, join our YouTube family by subscribing to the channel. Don't forget to like this video and tell me in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is. Now let's get into the story. The sound of splintering wood echoed through the empty house like a gunshot. For a moment, the old man froze. His hand, still gripping the rusted crowbar, trembled slightly, not from fear, but from the sudden weight of what he had just done. The wooden floorboard beneath him had cracked open, revealing a dark, hollow space that had likely not seen daylight in decades. He wasn't supposed to be here. Not anymore. Arthur Hale took a slow breath, his chest rising unevenly. The house smelled of dust and abandonment, like forgotten. Memories that had settled into the walls. Once it had been filled with laughter. Once it had been his. Now it belonged to strangers, or at least it would soon. The auction notice still burned in his mind. Final sale, no extensions. They had given him 30 days. 30 days to pack up a lifetime and walk away from the only place that had ever felt like home. He had left quietly. No fight, no argument, just like he always did. Arthur lowered himself to his knees with effort, his joints protesting as they always did these days. 72 years of life had worn him down, but not enough to erase the stubborn fire buried deep inside him. Not yet. His eyes drifted to the broken floorboard again. It wasn't planned. He had come back for one last thing, a small photograph he thought he had left behind. Something simple, something meaningless to anyone else. But as he walked across the living room, the floor had creaked in a strange way, hollow, different, and something about it had stopped him. Now here he was, breaking into his own past. Arthur reached into the gap and brushed away loose dirt and splinters. His fingers touched something solid, a box. He paused. His breath caught in his throat. It wasn't just any box. It was old, very old, the kind of old that didn't belong to him. Slowly, carefully, he widened the opening and pulled it out. Dust fell from its surface in soft clouds. It was small, wooden, worn at the edges. No lock, no markings. Just there, hidden, waiting. Arthur stared at it for a long time, his mind racing through possibilities. He had lived in this house for 40 years. 40. And never once had he seen or heard of anything like this. "Who put you here?" he whispered under his breath. There was no answer, only silence, the kind of silence that felt like it was listening back. His fingers hovered over the lid. A strange uneasiness crept into his chest. Not fear exactly, but something close to it, something deeper. Like the feeling you get when you realize you've just stepped into something you don't fully understand. He swallowed. Then slowly, he opened it. Inside there was no gold, no money, no treasure, just a stack of yellowed papers tied together with a faded ribbon. Arthur blinked. "That's it?" he muttered. Carefully, he lifted the bundle out. The papers were fragile, edges curled with age. The ribbon came loose with barely any resistance, as if it had been waiting to fall apart. He unfolded the first sheet. His eyes scanned the handwriting. And then he froze. His entire body went still. Because the name written at the top of the page was one he hadn't heard in over 30 years. Emily. The word left his lips like a ghost. Emily Hale. His wife. His hands began to shake. Not slightly this time, but violently. "No," he whispered, his voice cracking. "No, that's not possible." Emily had died 32 years ago. He remembered the hospital room, the quiet machines, the way her hand had slowly gone cold in his. He remembered the funeral, the empty house afterward, the silence. God, the silence. Arthur stumbled backward slightly, gripping the paper as if it might disappear if he let go. His heart pounded in his chest. Why was her name here? Why was something of hers hidden under the floor? And why had he never known about it? With trembling fingers, he began to read. The letter was dated 2 days before she died. Arthur's vision blurred. "No," he whispered again, shaking his head. "She would have told me. She would have, but she hadn't." And now, decades later, here it was, waiting for him. The words on the page felt heavier than they should have. Each line pulled him deeper into something he wasn't ready for, something buried, something unfinished. Arthur sank down onto the dusty floor, the box beside him, the letter trembling in his hands. And as he read the first few lines, his entire understanding of the past began to crack. Because this wasn't just a letter, it was a confession. And what it revealed about Emily was something Arthur had never imagined, something that made his stomach turn, something that made his breath stop. And just as his eyes reached the final line on that first page, a sound came from behind him. The front door creaked open. Arthur's head snapped up. He wasn't alone anymore, and whoever had just walked in had no idea what he had just found. but they were about to. And that was when everything truly began to change. Arthur's heart slammed against his ribs. For a split second, he couldn't move. The letter crumpled slightly in his trembling grip as the front door creaked wider, the sound cutting through the silence like a blade. Footsteps, slow, careful, not the hurried steps of a thief, not the confident stride of someone who belonged. Something in between. Arthur turned his head just enough to glance over his shoulder, his breath shallow, controlled, but barely. A young man stood in the doorway, mid-30s maybe, well-dressed but not flashy. Clean shoes, calm eyes, the kind of face that didn't reveal much but noticed everything. They locked eyes. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The air felt thick, heavy, like something invisible had just shifted between them. "You're not supposed to be here," the man finally said, his voice firm but not aggressive. Arthur swallowed, forcing himself to straighten slightly, though his knees protested. "I used to live here," he replied quietly. "For 40 years. The man stepped inside, closing the door behind him with a soft click. "That was before," he said. "The house was sold last week." Arthur gave a faint, bitter smile. "Funny how that works," he muttered. "A lifetime reduced to paperwork." The man didn't respond to that. Instead, his eyes dropped. To the floor, to the broken wood, to the box, and then to the letters scattered around Arthur. Something flickered across his face. Not surprise, recognition. Arthur noticed, and in that instant, something inside him tightened. "You know what this is," Arthur said slowly. It wasn't a question. The man hesitated, just for a second. But it was enough. "I don't," he replied, though his tone had shifted, slightly less certain. Arthur let out a soft breath through his nose. "Don't lie," he said. "You walked in here and didn't even ask what I was doing. Your eyes went straight to this." He lifted one of the letters slightly. The man's jaw tightened. Silence stretched between them again. Then finally, "My name is Daniel," the man said. Arthur didn't respond. He just watched him, studied him. There was something about him, something familiar, not in a way he could place exactly, but in a way that made his chest feel strangely tight. Daniel took another step forward, his gaze never leaving the letters. "I came to check the property," he continued. "Make sure everything was in order before renovation starts." Arthur gave a quiet, almost humorless laugh. "Seems like it wasn't as empty as you thought." Daniel didn't smile. His eyes flicked up to Arthur again. "Where did you find that?" Arthur hesitated, then slowly pointed to the broken floor. "Under there." Daniel's expression changed again. This time there was no hiding it. Something deeper, something serious. Arthur felt it instantly. "You knew," Arthur said, his voice lower now. "You knew there was something hidden here." Daniel didn't answer, right? Away. Instead, he walked closer, step by step, until he stood just a few feet away. Then he crouched down slightly, his eyes scanning the box, the letters, the exposed cavity in the floor. "I wasn't sure," he admitted quietly. Arthur's pulse quickened. "Not sure about what?" Daniel exhaled slowly, like he had been holding something in for a long time. "About whether it was still here." Arthur stared at him. His grip tightened on the paper. "Still here?" he repeated. "You're talking like you've been looking for this." Daniel's gaze shifted, from the box to the letter in Arthur's hand. "Not me," he said. Arthur frowned. "Then who?" Daniel looked up, and this time there was no hesitation. "My mother." The word hit Arthur like a sudden gust of wind. His mind stumbled. "Your mother?" he echoed. Daniel nodded. Arthur felt a strange unease crawl up his spine. "Why would your mother care about something hidden in my house?" Daniel opened his mouth, then stopped. His eyes dropped again. To the letter. Arthur followed his gaze, and suddenly the pieces didn't just feel scattered anymore. They felt like they were starting to align. Too perfectly. Too disturbingly. "Who is your mother?" Arthur asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Daniel didn't answer immediately. Instead, he reached into his coat pocket. Arthur's body tensed instinctively. But Daniel wasn't reaching for anything threatening. Just a folded photograph. Old. Worn. He held it out. Arthur hesitated before taking it. His fingers brushed against Daniel's briefly. And for a split second, there it was again. That strange, unexplainable familiarity. Arthur looked down at the photograph, and everything inside him stopped. Because the woman in the picture was Emily. Younger, smiling, standing beside a small child. Arthur's breath caught. His hands began to shake again. "No," he whispered, his voice breaking. That's not possible." He looked up at Daniel, really looked at him this time. The eyes, the shape of his face, the way he stood, the way he looked at that photograph. And suddenly, it wasn't subtle anymore. It was undeniable. Arthur's chest tightened painfully. "Who is she?" he asked. though deep down he already knew the answer. Daniel's voice was steady, but his eyes, they carried something heavy. "She's my mother," he said. Arthur's world tilted. "That's not what I meant," Arthur whispered. Daniel held his gaze, and then said the words that shattered everything Arthur thought he knew. "Her name is Emily Hale." The room fell silent. Completely, utterly. Arthur felt like the air had been sucked out of his lungs. His knees weakened beneath him. "That's impossible," he muttered, shaking his head. "Emily, she died. There was no child. His voice cracked. Daniel didn't interrupt. He just watched him. Waited, because he knew. Arthur looked back down at the letters, at the trembling paper in his hand. The confession. The date, 2 days before her death. And suddenly, the truth he had refused to even imagine was staring him directly in the face. She never told me," Arthur whispered. Daniel's jaw tightened slightly. "She couldn't," he said. Arthur's head snapped up. "Why not?" Daniel hesitated, just for a second. But this time, it wasn't uncertainty. It was something else, something heavier, something darker. And when he finally spoke, his words carried a weight that made Arthur's blood run cold. "Because," Daniel said quietly, "if she had told you, you wouldn't have let her go through with it." Arthur's heart skipped. Go through with what?" Daniel didn't answer immediately. Instead, he glanced down at the open box, at the remaining letters, at the truth still hidden inside them. Then he looked back at Arthur and said, "The part you haven't read yet." Arthur felt a chill run through his entire body. His eyes slowly dropped to the rest of the letters in his lap. His fingers hesitated, because something deep inside him was suddenly terrified of what came next. And yet, he knew he couldn't stop now, because whatever Emily had hidden, whatever she had kept from him all those years, was still buried in those pages, waiting. And as Arthur reached for the next letter, he had no idea that the truth inside it would force him to choose between the life he believed he had lived and the reality that was about to destroy it completely. Arthur didn't want to open it. His fingers hovered over the next letter, trembling, not from age this time, but from something far deeper. Fear, not the kind that comes from danger, but the kind that comes from truth. Because somewhere deep inside, Arthur already knew whatever was written on those pages was going to change everything. Not just what he remembered, but who he believed he was. Daniel stood silently across from him, watching, waiting. Not impatient, not nervous, just certain. Like a man who had spent his entire life walking toward this exact moment. Arthur swallowed hard. Then slowly, carefully, he unfolded the next letter. The paper crackled softly in the quiet room, and he began to read. "Arthur, if you're reading this, then I was too much of a coward to tell you the truth when I had the chance." Arthur's chest tightened instantly. The words hit differently now. He could hear her voice. Soft. Gentle. The same voice that used to whisper to him late at night, when the world felt too heavy. "There is something I have carried alone for years. Not because I didn't trust you, but because I loved you too much to risk losing you." Arthur's eyes blurred. "No," he whispered under his breath. Daniel didn't move. "You always believed our life was simple, honest. But there was a part of me you never knew, a part I kept hidden because I didn't know how to face it myself." Arthur's breathing grew shallow. Each word felt heavier than the last. "Before I met you, I made a mistake." Arthur flinched. The word echoed in his mind. Mistake. "I was young, afraid, and alone. I thought I could fix everything by running away from it." Arthur's grip on the paper tightened. "I gave birth to a child, Arthur." The world went silent. Completely, utterly. Arthur's heart didn't just skip. It stopped. For a moment, he couldn't even breathe. His eyes darted to Daniel instinctively, then back to the letter, as if hoping, praying that he had read it wrong. But the words didn't change. They stayed there, cold, unforgiving, real. Arthur's lips parted, but no sound came out. His entire body felt numb. And yet, he kept reading, because he had to, because there was no turning back now. "I was told it was the right thing to do, that I wasn't ready, that I would ruin both our lives if I tried to keep him." Arthur's chest rose sharply. "Him. So I let them take him." A tear slipped down Arthur's cheek. He didn't even notice. "I told myself it was over, that it was done, that I could move on." Arthur shook his head slowly. "No, Emily, no. Then I met you." Arthur's vision blurred completely now, and for the first time in my life, I felt like I could finally breathe. He let out a broken exhale. "You gave me a life I never thought I deserved. You gave me love without conditions, without judgment." Arthur closed his eyes for a moment. Pain twisted deep inside him. "And that's why I couldn't tell you." His eyes opened again. Because I was terrified that if you knew I had a child out there somewhere, you would look at me differently. Arthur shook his head, whispering weakly, I never would have. But the past didn't hear him. It never did. Years passed, and I tried to forget, but I couldn't. Arthur's breath hitched. I searched for him. Arthur's eyes snapped open wider. Searched? Quietly, secretly, without telling you. His heart began to race again. Faster. Harder. And I found him. Arthur's hand trembled violently now. His gaze shifted slowly into Daniel. Daniel didn't look away. He was alive. Arthur's throat tightened. Safe. Another tear rolled down. And he had a new life. Arthur's mind spun. I watched from a distance. I never told him who I was. Arthur's voice cracked as he whispered, Why didn't you tell me? Because by then, it was too late. Arthur swallowed painfully. You deserved the truth, but I was selfish. I didn't want to risk losing you. Not when I had already lost so much. Arthur's hands shook uncontrollably. But now, I don't have time anymore. His chest tightened. The hospital. The illness. She had known. So I'm leaving this for you. Arthur blinked through his tears. The truth I should have told you a long time ago. His breath slowed, as if bracing for impact. His name is Daniel. Arthur stopped breathing. Completely. Silence filled the room again. But this time, it wasn't empty. It was deafening. Arthur lowered the letter slowly, his hands numb, his mind shattered. He didn't need to read any further. He didn't need confirmation, because the man standing in front of him, the man he had felt that strange, unexplainable connection with, the man who had walked into this house like he already belonged there, wasn't a stranger. He never was. Arthur looked up. His eyes met Daniel's. And for the first time, he truly saw him, not as a stranger, not as an intruder, but as something else entirely. Something that made his chest ache in a way he couldn't describe. You knew, Arthur whispered. Daniel nodded slowly. I found her records years ago, he said quietly. I didn't know who you were back then. Not until recently. Arthur's voice trembled. Why didn't you come to me? Daniel hesitated. Pain flickered across his face. I wasn't sure you'd want me to. Arthur's heart broke a little more. I didn't even know you existed. I know. Silence again. But this time it wasn't cold. It was heavy, full of everything that had been lost, everything that could never be changed. Arthur looked down at the letter one last time, then back at Daniel, at his son, a word that felt unfamiliar. But somehow, right, you came here for this, Arthur said softly, glancing at the box. Daniel shook his head. No, he said. I came here to see you. Arthur's breath caught. To see me? Daniel nodded. I wanted to know the man she loved, he said. The man she chose to build a life with, instead of me. The words stung, but they weren't cruel. They were honest. Arthur swallowed hard. I would have, he began, then stopped, because he didn't know how to finish that sentence. Would he have accepted him? Would he have understood? Would he have stayed? The truth was, he didn't know. And that realization hurt more than anything. Arthur slowly pushed himself up to his feet. It took effort, more than usual, but he stood, facing Daniel, facing his past, facing the truth. I can't change what happened, Arthur said quietly. Daniel didn't respond. I can't go back and be the man I should have been, Arthur continued. The man who would have known, who would have been there. His voice wavered. But I'm here now. Daniel's eyes softened slightly. Arthur took a small step forward. Not too close, not too far, just enough. I don't expect anything from you, he said. Not forgiveness, not acceptance. A pause. But if there's even the smallest part of you that's willing, his voice dropped. I'd like to try. The room fell silent again. But this time, it felt different. Like something fragile had been placed between them. Something new, something uncertain. Daniel looked at him, really looked at him, for a long moment. And then, very slowly, he nodded. Arthur let out a breath he didn't realize he had been holding for decades. Tears blurred his vision again. But this time, they didn't feel as heavy. The past hadn't changed. The pain hadn't disappeared. But something else had taken its place. A chance. A second beginning. Arthur glanced down at the old wooden box one last time. At the letters. At the truth that had stayed hidden for so long. Then he looked back at Daniel. And for the first time in years, he didn't feel alone. Because sometimes, the things we lose aren't gone forever. Sometimes, they're just waiting to be found. And sometimes, what we discover in the end is not what was taken from us, but what was quietly waiting to come back.